Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for coming to tonight's Questions for Beekeepers question time. We have some great people answering questions. We have got Becky and Mark, who are on the same screen there. We've got Margaret Murden, who's a past president of BBKA.
Hi.
And we've got Enid Brown, who lives up in Scotland and has got some great experience of beekeeping in Scotland that I'm sure will come out tonight. We're going to go through the list of questions we've got, and if we have time at the end, we will take extra questions from the floor. But we'll see how we get on. So the first question is, how do you find Varroa resistant traits in your bees? And this was asked by Topsy Rudd. Mark and Beck are doing Varroa resistant bees. Would you like to start?
Okay, yeah. So we've just started our journey with Varroa resistance. So we've been monitoring quite a lot over the last year, and we're just about starting seeing some evidence now. You can do the classic monitoring of sugar rolls, alcohol, CO2 that we're all familiar with for checking Varroa levels. The problem with that is it only tells you the phoretic Varroa levels. So it's not a particularly good indicator of what's going on in the brood. The most commonly sort of widespread method in the UK for monitoring is monitoring Varroa boards. So to have an open mesh floor and to keep a Varroa board in and to check it on a once a week basis, so that you get a daily count. And that will vary throughout the year, but you can take an average. So you're looking for a daily average of under 5 basically for Varroa resistance. And if it's above 10, it's getting high. And now I know that's a lot higher than the NBU levels, but that's come from Steve Martin, who's doing a lot of research on this. Professor Steve Martin, I think he's University of Stockport. Salford University, apologies. And the other thing you're looking for on your board as well is chewed out pupae. So if you can see little white antennae, legs, maybe heads, that's a really positive sign. And the other really positive sign is bald brood. And if you have bald brood around the pink purple eye stage, then the bees are actually opening cells, and you may also get recapping, but they are looking for cells that are infested with Varroa. And what they do is if they find Varroa mites, even if the pupa is still alive, they will fish it out anyway. And what that does is interrupts the breeding cycle of the Varroa mites, and means therefore that whole breeding cycle is wasted. So the Varroa mite goes through 3 sets of that, then you can still have Varroa mite present, but they're infertile because they've basically used up all their eggs and haven't produced fertile mites. So that's the one that's suggested by Steve Riley, who's kind of leading this for Western beekeepers. There's a couple of other suggestions that you can use something called a Harbo test if you're interested in that. The guy who does a lot of stuff on that is an American guy called Corey Stevens. You are basically going through capped brood beyond the purple eye stage when it's just starting to tan, and you're starting, but you have to fish out 100 of them, and you carry on fishing out. If you see no Varroa in 100, then you've got Varroa resistance, but that's a lot of work. The latest way of checking for Varroa resistance that we're very excited about, that it's just available on the UK market, is called UBO. So U word B and then O, and it's a test where you can spray pheromone onto the cappings and 2 hours later check it and see if it's uncapped. And if you have Varroa resistant traits, then you'll see a percentage of that hatch that you've sprayed as uncapped. We've just bought some of this and we've just started testing our hives. It's kind of quite exciting. We found one so far that is Varroa resistant. So that's the easiest way. Out of 7. So that's the easiest way to test. There is a price tag with it, and it is brand new, available through. Are we allowed to do a plug? But
can we do a plug?
Simon the Beekeeper. It's available through Simon the Beekeeper
as of last Friday.
It's brand new to the UK. So those are the different options. So thanks, Beck. Do you want to add anything to that, Margaret?
No, I think that was very comprehensive. Very, very good indeed. Thank you very much.
Right, okay. We will move on to the next question, which I'm going to start asking Enid. How do I insulate my wooden hive over winter? And that's Ian Dawson's asked that. If you want to unmute.
I
don't worry too much actually about insulation. And while I've got a lot of hives here, I also have some up in the Aviemore area, which is a 2 and a bit hour drive for me and obviously a lot colder. So I work the double brood system with wide dummies either side of the brood boxes and 7 frames in each, which chimneys them, and I find that is a great help when it comes to isolation starvation. On top of the double brood, I have an empty super, and inside that I put my block of fondant directly on top of the brood frames, and above the fondant inside the super I have kingspan cut to fit, and then I have the crown board and lid, so it can be pretty cold up where the bees are, and I quite honestly find that absolutely sufficient. Never been a problem. So I just, as I say, it's kingspan inside the super rather than on top of the crown board.
Right, thanks,
Can I
Enid.
just ask Enid, does she have any insulation inside her fat dummies, or are they empty?
No, I actually have 50 ml kingspan or poly inside them, but you can also put wood shavings in, which would be just as good, I think. But I do find that makes quite a difference. And yet, so the sides of the hive are insulated to a certain extent, at least 2 sides are, but back and front aren't. But yeah, I've never had a problem with wrapping them or anything like that. I've never done that. So yeah, it's been fine.
Right, thanks. Beck, do you have anything to add, Mark?
Yeah, we have aluminium bubble wrap, 2 layers of that pinned into the roof, and we have 2 sheets of expanded foam in an eek on the roof, and that stays in all year round. And we also leave the Varroa boards in all year round, clean them once a week. And I've now taken to making my stands with solid tops. So there's another layer of wood underneath the boards before it gets exposed to the cold air under it. And that again is all year round. It works as just as well in the summer as the winter because it keeps them cool in the summer and it keeps them warm in the winter. And we followed the work of Derek Mitchell. He came and did a talk all about thermodynamics, thermodynamics in the hive, convinced us that insulation is the way to go. We haven't gone as far as wrapping the hives.
Yeah, you've got to unwrap it every time you do something.
Yeah, you could. I know people who stuck cork on the sides. It won't do any harm, but there are limits to how far you go. But yes, we insulate all year round.
And what about you, Margaret? Do you insulate?
Kingspan in the roof. I don't insulate at all, but I don't live as far north. I live in North Oxfordshire. Even when I lived up in the northwest, I never insulated, because actually, as long as you've got a big colony, they insulate them. They can keep themselves warm. It's the smaller colonies that will need insulation, or a nuke that's not in a polystyrene nuke box. But if you've got a big, strong colony, they will make a big cluster and they're perfectly able to keep themselves warm as long as they've got enough stores for metabolism.
We use clear crown boards. So if there was any condensation issues, and this is where it first came up for us, if there was condensation issues on the crown board, you'd see it. We originally used slightly smaller pieces of foam, and you could see around the edges where the condensation was. We now use foam that's cut exactly to size. You never see condensation on the crown boards, so it won't drip in. And when you do peel it back, the bees are very rarely clustered. Yes, they can cluster to keep themselves warm, but that may well be an emergency measure. And if you haven't properly insulated, and if they're inside a tree, they tend not to cluster. The theory is they might cluster in the first year while they're still building up their coat and still lining and warming up the tree. But by the second or third year, the tree has gained heat, stays warm, and the bees don't often cluster unless it's really cold. It's
One useful tip if you are buying the commercial insulation, the foam insulation, is if you're running nationals, but if you're going to use an eek, buy it for commercial hives because they're designed to fit in a super. So remember the super walls are pushed in a little bit, so it's a rectangle. And if you put that inside an eek, you've got a gap. So we buy, even though we're running nationals, we buy the commercial foam so that it fits snug inside the eek.
Okay.
and the old national ones go as the second layer.
They're supposed to be housed in the super. We still use them, but commercial foam.
Yeah, I'm on Smiths, and as I say, I just buy a big 8x4 sheet of 50mm Kingspan and cut it to fit, and it fits neatly inside a super with the big block of fondant underneath that.
Yeah, and your block of fondant fits the whole crown board, does it?
No, it's I don't sit it on top of a crown board. I always put my fondant directly on top of the frames, so that there's absolutely no question of the bees not being able to get at it. And then it's only 7 frames, so
Of course,
it covers a fair bit. And as I say, well, and I find also with having the 7 and 7 and the flat dummies either side, it's so easy for the bees to get up between the frames to where the food is, and they don't get stranded on where there's 11 frames. They don't get stranded on one side because it's so cold that the food's on the other side. And I haven't had problems with isolation starvation at all. And as I say, the insulation, not a problem, and that's even, as I say, up in the Aviemore area, which is a lot colder than it is even down in the Kinross area.
Excellent. That's quite a wide range of insulation being used there. Thank you. The next question is from James of Gloucester, and he asked the question, do I need to buy a queen? And he followed this up with, I have 3 colonies. How can I work out which one is best? So he's very cheekily put 2 questions in. So, Margaret, do you want to start with that one? Do I need to buy a queen? Asked
Okay,
James.
well, I think if you feel you need to buy a queen, we need to look at why that is. And how do you work out which one is the best? I take it you mean, how do I work out which colony is the best?
Yeah.
Or which is headed by the best queen, which probably amount to the same thing. Well, I think as beekeepers, we all have different criteria that we want from our colonies. Some people would say their best colony was the one that gave them the most honey. Or the most, I mean, for me, it's the colony that's the most docile. I'm sorry, Claire, have I done something there?
No.
For me, it's the one that's the most docile. So I want docile bees that are disease resistant. So I would be looking for the colony, and I mark my colonies according to how docile they are. So for me, the most important thing is that they're docile. The second thing, because I want to enjoy it. The second thing is that they are disease resistant, because I don't take honey off. So other people would say, well, in fact, I've spoken to somebody at the weekend, the best colony for me gives me the most honey. So I think it's a personal thing. And James, you have to decide what your criteria, what's important to you in keeping your bees. You know, if you're keeping them next door in your garden, next to your neighbours, it might be docility. If you're selling a lot of honey and you've got an out apiary, it might be the most honey. So you need to work out what is best for you. And then according to your records, you can work out which is the best colony for you. It might be which is the most prolific, which builds up quickly in the spring, because actually you're going to move them to a field of oilseed rape, or you're going to the heather, which is the best colony, which is the best queen that keeps laying late into the late summer, early autumn. And if you do that, then you shouldn't need to buy a queen. Nobody really, none of our hobby beekeepers should need to buy a queen. If you really, really can't raise your own queens, either by the Miller method or by simply splitting your colonies, then at least buy a local queen from your associate, from somebody else in your association. Please don't ever buy a queen, even from another part of the country, but certainly not from abroad. But have a look at your colonies, have a look at your records. If you keep accurate records, Have a think about what's important to you, and then work out which is your best queen and try and breed from her. Even if it's a simple split when she makes swarm cells, that's better than trying to get a queen from somewhere else.
Lovely. Right, Beck, do I need to buy a
Um,
queen?
I completely agree with everything Margaret said there. We do sell queens through our local association. And the one thing I would add to that is I get a lot of calls from people saying, have you got a mated queen? And I ask them, why do you need a mated queen? And they go, I think she's queenless. And my next question is, have you tried a test frame? And they go, oh, what's a test frame? So I'm sure everybody on this call knows, but if it's a, if people are new to beekeeping, then if you think you're queenless, you need to put in a frame of eggs and young larvae and check it a week later and see if it has queen cells. If there are no queen cells, the chances are there's a virgin queen running around and she's just not mated yet. So I am the worst salesperson for our association for queens, because if I can talk anybody out of buying a queen off us, then I absolutely will. Like Margaret, I'd much rather they did a split, kept a nuke. It's so much easier to requeen using a nuke than trying to faff around with queen cages, because you can just do a newspaper combination. So I would avoid it at all costs if you can. And I would only really get a queen if you're interested in, trying to get some different genetics or mixing it around or something like that. But I hope for most people it's not necessary. And at best, it'll get you a nice queen. But the worst, it's a waste of money because you put her in there and you get a queen killed.
I think Gloucester Association run queen rearing courses. I think if nobody else runs them, Marin does. But I'm sure there's other people in Gloucester that run, or in any neighbouring associations will run queen rearing. And, using something like the Miller method or simply split, it's not that difficult. And it's so satisfying to find, to raise your own queen and get her mated.
Yeah, I know Jeremy Quinlan runs it for Suffolk, so we attended his. We run it for Sheffield.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of them around the country. Perhaps what we need to do is advertise them better.
I would advise James, it's just another level of enjoyment in beekeeping. Once you've kept bees, raised queens, it is great, and then you can end up selling them to somebody else.
It's really satisfying. But perhaps, Diane, we ought to list something on the website or in the magazine or something saying these are the queen rearing courses, or something like that.
Great idea.
Great idea.
Yeah, brilliant. Enid, do you want to add anything?
Not really. I fully support what Margaret said. I've never bought a queen and I'm really very much against it, but certainly from further afield, if you really do have to requeen and you can't do it yourself, then get local. But I'm very much against all the imports and buying from further afield.
Thank you. Right, the next question is about drone congregation areas. How are they established and do they change throughout a given year and then following years? Margaret,
well, there will always be drone congregation areas where there is an accumulation of hives. And they tend to be in the same place every year. And I certainly have found this when I used to go over to Ireland a lot, we could always find the drone congregation areas there. They seem to be constant. And the theory is, although I have to say that this is a theory, the theory is that it's the drone's pheromones. But given, bear in mind, pheromones are volatile chemicals. The drone's pheromones hang around from year to year. And the queen is attracted by the drone pheromones. Now, given that she goes to one drone congregation area and the drones from her colony go to another drone congregation area, you have to ask, do the drones from different colonies have different pheromones? Because she never goes to the drone congregation area where her drones are going. She actually flies further. She's only got a small crop, so she has to go there and back on a single crop load of nectar. But she's in and out, so that doesn't matter. But the idea is that the drones produce pheromones, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of drones in the drone congregation area. So I can imagine that the queen will pick up those pheromones. But why she picks them up from one congregation area, which is not the nearest, her drones go to the nearest. Why she does that, I think it'd be the next Nobel Science Prize. Because nobody actually knows that. We know it's the drone pheromones. And once the queen's there, we know it's her pheromones that attract unrelated drones. But they are in the same place every year. And if you find them, you'll find them every year in that place. And it's topography. It's to do with a valley and somewhere where there isn't always high winds, although that could be changing with the way the climate's going. You know, so it's in a valley, usually with trees or structures like that, which are easily recognizable. But we don't actually know how, with the, you know, we're given the storms and the winds, how those drones' pheromones stay there from year to year. And people have said to me, well, the thing is, the workers from the colony escort the queen or escort the drones. Well, no, they can't possibly, because the workers from that colony weren't there last year, so they can't possibly know where it was. The only person who was there last year was the queen, unless she's this year's queen. And she isn't going because she got mated last year. So nobody who goes to a drone congregation area has been there before, unless it was yesterday. Because the drones, if they mate, they die. If they don't mate, they get kicked out. The queen's been the year before, and the workers weren't there. So it's definitely the drones' pheromones that hang around somehow that attract other drones and the queen.
Thank you. Enid, have you got any thoughts on this?
I think a lot to do with the lie of the land and everything as well as to where the drone congregations are. When a few years back when we were at Gormanston, it was quite interesting going out with the fishing rod and the queen pheromone substance on it, and you just went into sort of fairly open field, and it was quite interesting. If you were in one spot, all the drones came charging after the fishing rod, and you just needed to move a few yards away from it, and they just weren't interested. Yeah, quite fascinating.
And there was queen pheromones on the end of the fishing rod, or there was a dead queen or something on the end of that fishing rod. And it used to happen every year over at Gormanston.
Yep. I think they used a pheromone, queen pheromone.
Yeah, the pheromone lure, you can guess.
Right.
But there is no communication between the virgin queen and the drones, other than she is picking up their pheromones. And there will always be drones from another colony. So there is no communication there, but nobody actually knows how the drones find the drone congregation area, or indeed how the virgin queen finds the drone congregation area. They don't even know if she goes to one drone congregation area on one day and a different drone congregation area on the next day, if she's going out on 2 consecutive days. I think that's fascinating research for somebody to do.
Thank you. Beck, Mark?
No, the only thing I would add is, if you're interested in it, is to look at Gudrun Koeniger's research, or a book. I think it's Mating Biology of Honeybees, and there's a National Honey Show talk that's available through BBKA. I think it was 2015. It was 10 years ago, but it's an excellent talk and an excellent book. It's a really good read on mating biology. So, but yeah, I agree with the other two.
And apparently Gilbert White, naturalist in the late 18th century, recorded what turned out to be a drone congregation area. It is still there to this day. Drones still congregate at the same place. And it is on my list of things to do, is to go fishing for a drone congregation area. Having read about it, I really want to do it.
Beck, did you say that the National Honey Show talk is on the BBKA website or the National?
I think it's on YouTube. I'm not sure it's on the BBKA website, but if you look up Gudrun Koeniger Mating Biology of Honeybees, National Honey Show, it pops up on YouTube.
Probably
So
on
it
the
might
National
not
Honey
be
Show
linked to
website
the
as well.
BBKA website, but it was National Honey Show.
Okay.
Yeah, we might put some links that people are referring to on the recording.
Yeah, the book's
details.
Jamie Ellis as well.
Right. Thanks, John in Exeter, for that question. The next one is from Alan in Torbay. What advice would you offer to hobbyist beekeepers that would reduce winter losses? Probably a really useful question to start. Beck and Mark?
Well, we were given some advice when we started out. Feed them and treat them. If you do that at the right time of the year, then you won't go far wrong. There's plenty of other things you can do, both bad and good. But if you do those 2 things and do them properly, you should be okay. Now, if you're a hobbyist with 1 or 2 hives, that's pretty straightforward. If you end up having a lot more hives, and I almost guarantee in the first few years you will have more hives, there are other things you can do. You can combine weak colonies into strong colonies. You can make sure you've got younger queens in those colonies. You can insulate, particularly if you're in an exposed site. there are a number of things you can do to improve your chances. Test your colonies for nosema, or get your club to do it for you.
The other thing I would say is that they need to be in the right size box. So if you've got a tiny colony and you look in September and they're only on 3 frames, then you might as well transfer them to a nuke. They're not going to get any bigger. So it helps them to be in a right size box. Poly boxes, apparently, talk to the commercials, they say poly boxes because they're so well insulated, they overwinter better. So insulation is a good thing. The one thing I would add to what Mark said about treatments is, I think more often than not, people get their late summer treatments wrong. Your winter bees are laid down as eggs in September. So you need to be using a late summer treatment to knock back your Varroa levels, unless you're VSH, which is a completely separate part of the conversation. But something like the thymol-based treatment, so Apiguard, Api-Life, VAR, all those types of treatments, you need to be using those mid-August because they're temperature dependent and they're no longer effective from mid-September. And it's too late for your winter bees. If your winter bees are damaged by Varroa, then they are not going to make it all the way through to March. So that is one of the key things, as well as the right treatment, treating early enough, and making sure you've knocked those Varroa levels right back.
And we've had several beginners who in the spring said, oh, my bees died. And we asked the question, what did you treat with and when? And it turns out they were using Apiguard in November.
October, November, too late.
Just far too late, far too late. So get your treatments right, read the instructions, read them again so you fully understand them and do it properly. You do get your head around that and you will be much better off next spring.
Thank you. Margaret, would you like to add anything?
If I remember correctly, Diane, the BBK does a winter losses survey, and it says how many colonies went into October and how many colonies did you have in April. And the reason it does that is because most winter losses occur in spring. People go into their colonies doing their oxalic acid and the bees are fine. They think, that's great, I don't have to do any more. And they go in the end of March or whenever they go in again, and the bees have not survived. And what people don't take into account is in the early spring, the queen starts laying. And those bees have been there all winter. So they're at a disadvantage because any disease that they had has had time to build up in them. They have to feed the queen, feed the young larvae, go foraging, and keep the hive warm. And that, you know, the larvae then get just about enough food because there aren't enough bees around. And very often the food runs out because they are using so much food just for their own metabolism. They have to raise the temperature of the brood nest from 20 degrees, which it is all winter, to 34.5. And that takes a hell of a lot of food. So most of the winter losses are in the spring. That's the first thing I'd say. So make sure when you've done your oxalic acid treatment, if you do it, that in January and February, you feed them. If they haven't got enough food here, even if you think you have, I put candy pollen every year on all of my colonies, whether I think they need it or not. And they always take it, and I get empty plastic bags back. The second thing people do is take small colonies into the winter. And they very often think, I'll just unite this small colony with this big healthy colony. Why is it a small colony? Is it a small colony because it's got a disease? It's got an old queen or whatever. Never unite going into the winter unless you know that both of those colonies are disease-free. And then feed them as early as you can. If you take the honey off, feed them as early as you can. Thick syrup so that they can dilute it. So they can evaporate the water off it and take it down. So think spring losses, not winter losses.
Thank you. Enid, do you want to add anything?
Not really. I think Margaret's given an absolutely excellent answer there. Definitely strong colonies, feeding and disease-free. And yeah, I certainly agree with her. If somebody's going to lose a colony, it will tend to be early spring, February, March time, when they don't realise that the queen started laying. They have to increase the temperature, but also some of the winter bees will begin to sort of die off a wee bit as well. So yeah, I would say Margaret's
one other thing, Diane, excuse me, take the queen excluder out. Never let them go through the winter with the queen excluder. Put it in the roof because otherwise you'll never be able to find it when you need it. Take the queen excluder out.
Yes, that's very good advice. Right, we'll move on to the next question, which is about a colony that's really defensive and has been defensive for several years despite having been requeened. It's very productive. It doesn't have any disease, but it pings and follows to a great extent despite this requeening. What might be causing that when the other colonies in the apiary are quite nice? Margaret, we'll start with you.
Right, I would say, first of all, how defensive is it? Is it really pinging? Is it aggressive? And I'd say, how big is the colony? Because one of the things I found is if colonies are defensive, they're very often hungry. I would suggest in this case, this colony may be it may be being robbed out. It may be being robbed by the other colonies, and it's being defensive because there's robbers going in. I mean, that's what I found. Those two reasons for colony. Apart, I'm assuming the beekeeper is a good beekeeper because the other colonies are fine. So either the colony is hungry, which it could be if the other bees are robbing it, you know, or if it's wasps or other bees from other colonies that are going in, it's going to be defensive. So that's the first thing I'd look at. And then I'd say, when you've requeened it, have you requeened it from a queen from a docile colony? You know, that you need to look at docile colonies, but also if you think about it, she's mated with about 15 drones. So you've got in that colony, you've got 15 dads and 15 lines of daughters, and probably only one of those drones is defensive. But of course, when you take the caron board off and they hit you, you don't think that 90% of them are docile. So I would say, look at your drone. Don't let, for the future, fork out those drones. Don't let those drones mate, because all you are doing is making the next generation defensive as well. So get rid of your drones and think about robbing. Reduce the entrance right down so that if they are being robbed by other colonies, and you might not have noticed that, there might be silent robbing going on there.
It does say it's the most productive colony in the apiary, so I don't know whether that means it's not being robbed.
It's not being robbed out, no.
Yeah.
But it could be, you know, one of the reasons it could be productive, because I looked at that, that is, if we've got a very aggressive colony, we tend to leave it alone. Every time we go into a colony, you lose a day's honey. So if you're leaving them alone, they will make more honey. It's no question about that. If you go into your bees all the time, you disrupt them so much that you lose a day's honey. You leave them alone, they'll make more honey. So I would say, make sure you get a queen from a docile colony. One of your other colonies, raise a queen and requeen that colony. Reduce the entrance and make sure it's not being robbed. Fork out your drones.
Do you want to add anything, Enid?
Yeah, I think he commented that he had tried requeening without any luck, and very much, as Margaret said, depends where the queen has come from, and certainly not from a queen cell that colony has raised. And I think if that's what the colony is like and struggling to get it calm, then can he cope with a colony like that, or is it really a nuisance? If he's tried all sorts of things, then, and I would think it's curtains to that colony, because why should you suffer with an aggressive colony? But I think there's lots of things that you could try first before disposing of it.
Can I just say something else? Excuse me, Diane. I'd be interested in whether or not this beekeeper inspects this colony last when they're doing the inspections. I bet you anything the inspection that this is the last colony to be inspected. And if that is the case, unless they put clean gloves on, they are going into this colony every single time with pheromones from previous colonies. So I would go into this colony first, or else change my gloves, change my hive tool. I'd go into this colony first and do it first with a reduce the entrance. And have a look.
One of the bee inspectors told me once, if you've got a colony that's a bit tetchy, do it first, otherwise it will see the activity from all the other hives and put itself on edge because it knows, you know, there's something going on.
One of the things that,
sorry, Go on, Beck.
I agree. One of the things that we also have seen in other people's apiaries, and you kind of learn from what other people do, good or bad, that if you have multiple hives on one stand, so if you've got like 3 on this lovely row, you start clonking around in one, and that bees can feel the vibrations. And by the time you get to that 3rd one in the row, so I would be interested in this person's apiary layout. We have all our colonies on individual stands, all orientating, all 2 meters apart, all orientating in different directions. If you've got a row of bees and you're working your way along, by the last one, they're going to know you're coming. And B, if it's the end of the row, if you have a particularly prevailing wind, all the drifting bees end up in one colony. It could be why it's the most productive. It might be that if they're all close together, the wind's blowing them all, they're all in there, and it's grumpy because it keeps getting everybody else's bees coming in, and it makes them more defensive. So it might be equally, it could equally be a hungry colony. It could equally be a very full colony if it's the most productive, and they get defensive when they have a lot to defend. If they filled the entire thing and there's no space to put stuff, they will just hunker down and fight anything off. So thinking about apiary layout and having the colonies 2 meters apart and all spanned out facing in different directions to reduce drift, and so they don't know you're coming. They can't see you walking in front of the hives.
You find sometimes as well that if maybe it was a docile colony to begin with, a particular type of bee, without naming any, that to 2nd generation or that's when the aggression sometimes kicks in. So yeah, I think you just have to be careful where you get your bees, who you get them from.
I think we need more info,
of,
don't we, from Andre about that.
It'd be interesting to move that one hive completely away, the 3-mile rule, certainly a long way away, and see if the next one up becomes the nasty one.
Or when it comes,
and then bring it back a month or 2 later at the other end and see if it remains nasty.
Yeah,
that'd be an interesting little approach.
It would be. So I hope Andre's going to watch that. Right, we will start.
But quite frankly, if it says several years, regardless of time of year, and if you've got multiple colonies, I wouldn't be wasting my time, having had a very nasty experience recently with nasty bees.
Right. So if you have queen cells, in what circumstances would you leave them to supersede? Would it be 1 queen cell in the middle of a frame? What about 2 in the middle, or 1 in the middle at the bottom? And that's Sylvia's question. Can we start with Enid this time?
So long as I'm pretty sure that it's definitely Supersedure, I would reduce it down to 1, and Supersedures tend to be on the centre, so rather than down the bottom, I would rather reduce it down to 1, but I would make sure that it's a good, preferably open but advanced queen cell that I could actually see inside and see all the royal jelly and everything. I have my queens marked and clipped, so I wouldn't worry desperately if they lost the old queen, because knowing that there is that single queen cell there. Yeah, I personally tend not to leave any more than 1, and I would mark the frame that 1 queen cell is on.
Thank you. Beck, do you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I would add is we've had what we thought was a supersedure cell, and they've swarmed on it. So we would only ever leave supersedure cells if we're pretty confident that swarm season's over. So mid-July, August onwards. But by then we've pretty much stopped inspecting anyway, so we might not even notice.
And if you look at the hive, are they still doing really well? In which case, why would they be superseding? That makes it more likely to be a swarm. If she's a really lovely queen and you want to breed from her next year, I would stick her in a nuke and do the 1 queen cell and go back again and check later that they haven't made more, because that can happen quite often. You think you've done the job, walk away, and they're still disappeared. You just have to be on the ball with queen cells. Never trust that they're supersedure just off the bat. You've got to think long and hard about it.
Thank you. Margaret?
The interesting thing about supersedure cells is that they're all the same age, more or less. unlike swarm cells. So if they are bang smack in the middle of the brood, and they are directly straight down rather than elephant trunks, and there's 2 or 3 of them, I would leave them. Or if it was a really nice colony, I might harvest some of them and put them in nukes. If you're worried about it, I would take the resident mated queen out and put her in a nuke, in a 3 or 4 frame nuke. And I leave them, if it's supersedure, and my colonies do supersede, unfortunately, in the autumn, but never mind. I would leave them to sort themselves out because they're all the same age, and the first one out will get rid of the others. All the workers will get rid of them. And usually with supersedure, they're all on the same frame, occasionally on 2 different frames. Certainly in my colonies, they're on the same frame. And they're all the same age, so they'll sort each other out. But if you are at all worried, or you suspect for a minute that they might be swarm cells, take the queen out, the resident mated queen, put her in a nuke with some food and some brood and things like that, and let them get on with it, because they won't swarm, particularly if there's only 2 or 3 of them.
Thank you. The next question's from John Downing, who asks, effectively, he's asking, how long should he wait for his queen to be mated? Last year, it took 7 weeks, he says, and it was only because someone in his association said, be patient, that he was patient, and eventually she started laying. Is 7 weeks too long? Margaret?
Yes. 7 weeks is definitely too long. I did some calculations here and said, I want to know 7 weeks from when. 7 weeks from when they swarmed, or 7 weeks, even from 7 weeks from the egg is laying. I reckon 1 week, 16 days for the queen to emerge from the egg, from when the egg is laid, and then another week, say at the most, and to get mated, and then. So I would be looking at the very most, I'd say 5 weeks from when the egg is laid, but I don't think this person is talking about from when the egg is laid. The only thing that could have happened, and this has happened to me in the past, is that the queen gets mated, and then the weather turns, or there's nothing coming in, and they don't feed her, so she's not laying. But for that to happen twice in 2 years running is very unusual, and it can happen. I mean, I've had a queen go off lay for 6 weeks. And I've, when I was years ago, I was thinking, what am I going to do about this? Because I thought I'd lost my queen. There was the queen walking around. So it could be that she's got mated. She's obviously got mated. And then they start feeding her. Or they stop feeding her because they'll feed the queen on income. They won't feed the queen from stores unless it's in the winter. So there's no income coming in. So she's not laying. And for that to happen 2 years running, it's very, very unusual. So I would say from when the colony swarms, I would be looking for 4 weeks. And if I've got apodias, I reckon 4 weeks before there's eggs there.
Beck, Mark?
I think the thing that I agree with everything Margaret says there. We look at 3 weeks. At 3 weeks, if we don't see anything, we'll add a test frame. And at 5 weeks, it's curtains. We're expecting to see eggs. I think the thing that worried me about the question was actually, I think this is a beekeeper that needs to think about their swarm prevention. And I think we found it difficult and challenging early on in our beekeeping, is that if you're getting them swarming every year, it's very upsetting, it's difficult, it makes life challenging. And I was going to suggest giving a few tips on swarm prevention in answer to the question to not get there in the first place. And the one thing that's really helped us in our beekeeping is following the work of a guy called Kevin Thorne in Suffolk. And what he does is he instead of just double brooding, where they tend to fill up the whole space with food and therefore they're still food bound and there's no space for the queen to lay, he has a very clever system of adding a brood box super above the first brood box from April, above the queen excluder. And what he does every week is he takes out a couple of frames of eggs and young larvae, moves them into the middle of the upper box, and he adds empty drawn comb, which is usually the next one along, interspersed. So he's always creating space to lay in that brood box. And as you go, it goes in the middle, then it spreads to the sides and adds more to the middle. And by the 3rd week, it's starting to emerge. You can put it back down. It's always giving the queen space to lay. So my advice to this beekeeper is everything that Margaret said about swarm control and time, but think actively on a weekly basis about putting a couple of frames of empty drawn comb, maybe at positions 4 and 7 in your brood nest, just so that there's somewhere for the queen to lay, and that should radically change your swarm prevention. So hopefully then you won't be in this position in the first place.
And also, he does say here, I tried the donor frame earlier, and they just said, thank you very much.
That's great.
That tells you something.
Yeah.
We've had several people again with the whole, can I buy a queen? We said, have you done a test frame? They go, yes. We say, what happened? They said, nothing. That tells you something. You put a test frame in order to tell you something. Take cognizance of what it is telling you. And if you're not sure, stick another one in.
We do have one funny, humorous anecdote. We had a colony this year. At 5 weeks, I sent to Mark, no, 5 weeks, it's curtains, Mark. I go, no, I saw an egg. He insisted on
This is a
leaving.
nuke on top of a tower.
We found a queen in there 7 weeks later, but she had a blue dot on and was marked and clipped. I hadn't put it there. We like Ina, we mark and clip our queens. She'd swarmed, fallen off the floor, walked 10 meters across the apiary from one side to the other, and climbed up a hive and gone and joined that nuke on top of a hive stand. So do check, because you never know.
The other thing is, it's possible that, first of all, if the weather was bad and she could have taken 2 weeks to get mated. You know, she might not have been able to get out and mate if the weather was bad. But also, sometimes when people go in their colonies, they don't actually, they put the supers down and the queen goes in the super. So I would also look for eggs in the super. And the next time you go from your colony, she gets back in the brood box. So I would look and see if there's brood in your super.
I'd
The
like to
other
see a
thing
show of
is,
hands.
well, yeah, the other thing as well is if it's a very strong colony, it takes it's longer for the queen to start laying, and they often wait till the bulk of the brood has emerged. Whereas if you have to the other extreme, apidias, which are much smaller, the queens get mated very quickly. But this year, I think, has been notorious for that. And I've known somebody who was really quite disappointed that a lot of her hives were queenless, and then just very recently came back to me delighted to say there's good eggs in all the hives, you know, and it's just been that sort of year where they've been slow in getting going.
Thank you. The next question is from Becky and Mark, actually. It says, how long have you been keeping bees? And when did you pass the Master Beekeeper exam? That's someone being a bit nosy.
Yes, apologies. I didn't include it on our bio because we're the likes of Enid and Margaret who've been beekeeping forever. We actually only been beekeeping for 5 years, and we passed our Master Beekeeper last year, so it's a short time. But my apologies. Yes, I did miss it off the bio because we have people here who are far more experienced and doing it for an awful lot longer than we have.
Doesn't mean we're better beekeepers.
And we have worked very hard to actually do that. I know we're aware it's a very short amount of time, and Mark and I, because we beekeep together, we have worked phenomenally hard. My theory on is you can get a degree in astrophysics in 3 years. So if you work hard enough, there's no reason why you can't get the qualifications, but it is hard work.
So, and they go on to ask about how you got the information about VSH, and
that's a good question, actually, because we had Steve Riley come to our association for one of the talks, and prior to that, we were really nervous about this talk about treatment-free beekeeping, because we were absolutely convinced that people who didn't treat were going to kill their bees,
and to a large extent they did.
And to a large extent, that's what happens. They might have a VSH colony, but the rest die. It's overwhelmed. They're robbed out, and the Varroa spreads, and even a VSH colony, a Varroa sensitive hygienic or Varroa resistant colony, is overwhelmed. But we were very impressed by the scientific approach from Steve Riley and from Steve Martin, Salford University. So we went to the Biblical conference in February, but we have been monitoring for Varroa for over a year. And it wasn't through BBKA. I'm pleased to say that BBKA are sort of cottoning on with this, as we are, and it's a really exciting new area. We are not advocating just going treatment free, but if you're interested, there's a lot of really great stuff on how to transition to treatment free by breeding for Varroa resistant bees. Steve Riley, I'm do a plug for his book. I think it's the Honeybee's Solution to Varroa is very good, and some of the work from Corey Stevens and a lady called Kara Wagner in the States. There's some very interesting new stuff going on, which we are hoping to be part of, and we're hoping to be able to transition to Varroa resistant and treatment free at least some of our apiaries over the next. But hopefully we're starting now. We found one Varroa resistant one, so we're hoping to get a Varroa resistant apiary this summer, and then we're going to stop the treatment and see what happens in one apiary.
There's also the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild of Michigan, they run conferences online all the time. There's because in America, VSH is the thing, has been a recognized thing for 10, 15 years. It's only just come over here. And the likes of Steve and have taken on board. I mean, I went down to Steve Riley's place. I'm not advocating everyone goes down to his house, but he was a very nice chap. Spent the morning showing me his hives, what to look for on the boards, explained his book. And that's where we started. You have to follow it because a lot of the treatment-free people have learned to keep their heads below the parapet because and we were as guilty as anybody of saying you mustn't do that.
Quite a stigma attached.
There's quite a stigma attached. We are now on the other side of the fence, but doing it in a scientific manner, not just, they call it the James Bond approach, don't they? The live and let die. We're not in the live and let die camp. Nor is Steve Ryan. He says if you have non-resistant bees, then you need to know that and you need to treat them and mark them down for requeening with more resistant varieties when you have them available. Breed from your best. Don't breed from the ones that aren't VSH, and don't let their drones breed either.
Some of the reason with doing this is, and people have probably read about the losses in America. I know they're heavily reliant on treatments, and it's the Amitraz Apivar type treatments, but they have now got another synthetic chemical after the fluvalanates that the bees are now resistant. So the mites are now resistant. So the Amitraz is no longer effective at killing Varroa mites in the US, and they've had 90% losses because another hard chemical has fallen by the wayside. There are still very effective treatments. So for the majority of people on this call, we're still advocating treat your bees, consider IPM, perhaps if you are using Apivar, use that 1 year and perhaps use a thymol-based one the next year. Still use Apibioxin or another oxalic-based treatments in winter. But we're quite excited about the idea of them being healthier bees. And there is now emerging evidence that they're resistant to many other things, including chalk brood, sac brood, even nosema at a high enough level of resistance, they become nosema resistant. So,
and it also transpires that when Varroa came here, the wild colony collapsed. There were very few left. Well, 30 years of natural selection has meant that in the wild, a lot of those survivor colonies are surviving. And of course, their drones are out there mating with our queens. So they say, oh, open mating, it will dilute the traits. Actually, no. Open mating, if you've got VSH and they're open mating, the chances are they're going to make at least some of the VSH wild drones, who, for other reasons, are healthier, stronger, and more fertile anyway. And we can discuss that at a later date. And you will expand your VSH once you've got it. And there is at least one person on here who's helped me immensely by supplying me with a couple of queens.
If anybody is interested in the Varroa resistant side of things, and not necessarily treatment free, but there is a Varroa resistant UK website where there's some information about the UK's approach. So perhaps refer people to
Steve's site, isn't it? Steve Martin's site.
It's Steve Martin's site and others, yes.
And hopefully BBK will pick up that because we think it is the way forward.
And they've done workshops, haven't they, at the spring convention for 3 years now. So it's an interesting and very new.
It is an interesting topic.
Can I just come in here, Diane, just quickly?
You can.
I was listening to a Zoom talk last week, I think it was, about the gut biome of honeybees, because everybody's obsessed with our own gut biome. Well, gut biome of honeybees, and one of the problems is that these heavy treatments, these miticides that we keep giving them, are actually affecting the biome of the honeybee's gut, which is killing actually a lot of good bacteria as well as the intended, what they're intended to kill. And that could well be making them less resistant to all diseases and also to mites.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, which I'm sure BBK will continue to look at. And perhaps we'll have some talks lined up on it.
Going back to the start of that original question there, commenting on how long have you been keeping bees, does that really matter? I think no matter how long you've been keeping bees, if you get the opportunity to attend a lecture or a demo, then you will always pick up tips. Even if you've been keeping bees for as many years or just a few months, attend as many lectures and demos as possible. There's always something that either reminds you of about something or a tip that's new to you.
And join the
Absolutely.
study groups, even if you don't take the exams. We are enormously grateful to the people who ran our study groups.
In fact,
And-
one Diane Drinkwater was our
we
first
did,
study
we
group.
did yours, not two, didn't we, Diane? Your study group. They're superb,
Yeah.
and it was enormously helpful to our beekeeping and for our bees as well. You know, at the end of the day, this is about being better at looking after our bees, and that was our motivation.
And we did do it in 4 years, which is some kind of, not necessarily a record, but it's a very short space of time. But we count it as, if you keep one hive of bees for 1 year, that's one hive year. You can have 2 hives in your back garden for 10 years and accumulate 20 hive years. Or you can have 20 bee hives in your garden or apiaries for 2 years to gain the same amount of experience.
We've got about 40 colonies.
We've gathered over 100 hive years in this.
You know what? I think a lot of it's got to do with the sort of person you are and whether you're open-minded, because I've come across beekeepers, you know, talks I've given. They've been keeping bees for 25 years and they've challenged things I've said. And I've said that you haven't been keeping bees for 25 years. You've been keeping bees for 1 year, 25 times.
I'm going to remember that.
You can be a bad keeper, be a bad beekeeper for 25 years or a really good
Yeah.
beekeeper. And, you know, it depends on your attitude to learning and your attitude to your bees.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the talks that BBK have been putting on have been really appreciated by everyone who comes on them, because I hear everyone say thank you at the end. So I know everyone who comes really enjoys them. And I know people watch them again on catch up on YouTube. So it's really appreciated.
Are they
And
on
the
you?
spring-
Are they going to? Is this going to be put on YouTube?
It will be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the spring convention, and we've been to 2 now. They are brilliant.
Brilliant.
We sign up to as many of the lectures and workshops as we can. You learn an awful lot in one go. It's just, and you meet so many other beekeepers too. It is just a great event to go to. I'd recommend it.
Absolutely. Right, we will move on with a couple more questions before we finish up. Somebody has asked the question, is there ever a scenario where you would get swarm cells and supersedure cells at the same time in a hive? We'll go to Margaret for that one.
No.
Thank you.
If you think
Sorry.
supersedure cells, if you think you've got supersedure cells and swarm cells at the same time, then they're either swarm cells or supersedure cells. Because a colony that is superseding their queen is not happy with that queen and is not going to swarm with her. They will only swarm, usually they will only swarm with a mated queen, which is healthy. And because they want to build a new colony. They will, if they're unhappy with their queen, they will supersede her. So I would say, you know, they're either swarm cells built in the wrong place, i.e. in the center of the brood nest, or they're supersedure cells built in the wrong place, i.e. around the edges. I've never come across it. It's very unlikely. And if you think logically, it shouldn't happen. There's probably one time when it did happen, and that is it. But how do you know? How do you know that what those queen cells are?
Yeah. Right, we will go on to another question. Thank you for that answer, Margaret. This one I will ask for Mark to start with. What are the important things to think about when setting up a bait hive? I tried one this year and left some stores in the brood box. I think it encouraged robbing, and that's from Gillian.
Rule 1, we're setting a bait hive. Do not put any stores in it. I've got a dozen bait hives. The vast majority are basically a brood box. I put a frame of foundation to the side and leave the rest of the box free. Sometimes I put starter bars, but that's it. So the bees can fly in it and work out how big the thing is. You see advice saying put an old brood comb in. Well, A, they can be full of disease, and B, you don't want them laying eggs in old brood combs. What I do is take a brood comb from a disease-free colony, break it up, and put it on the floor of the hive so it smells of bee. The other thing I use is lemongrass oil. Couple of drops on a cotton bud. You can overdo it. Literally a couple of drops. Put that on the runner where the frames would go, put a crown board on, put the lid on, and a slit entrance at the bottom of the hive. It works for the whole, but Tom Seeley will say to you, a slit is the best way. The next thing you've got to think about is where are you going to put it? Tom Seeley says 10 to 15 feet is the best, and it probably is, but you don't want to be going 10 to 15 feet up a tree to retrieve it. Put it somewhere where you can see it and where you can get at it once the bees will have turned up. I've had bees turn up on a box sitting on the bench in the back garden. Twice.
This year.
Most of them are on tops of flat roof sheds. There's one in my workshop, right opposite the kitchen window. I see it every day. We love watching the scouts. We love seeing the swarms arrive. Put it somewhere convenient. People say put them in the shade. All mine are in full sun. we catch swarms in bait hives all the time. Have more than one, spread them around because they won't all work every time.
Don't have an open mesh floor. It needs a solid floor.
Solid
They
floor
don't
is
like
important.
open mesh floors. They need to be in space.
And as soon as they have arrived, what I do, either I rehouse them straight away. But what I usually do is then I can put frames of foundation in, let them draw those for a couple of days, and that's when you treat and feed if you're going to treat. And once they've used up the honey in their crops. But once they're on the frames, you can immediately move them into a main hive, or preferably a polynuke because you're getting it off the roof, and then set the thing up again and start again. And I've had our first 2 colonies were a bait hive, and then we emptied it, and then 8 days later, another swarm turned up in the same bait hive.
Thank you.
If you've not read Tom Seeley's Honeybee Democracy, give that a read. He says the entrance is going to be 15 centimetres to 20 centimetres square. So if it's 7 millimetre, you want it at least 20 centimetres long. But it's a great read, that book.
So there's that book, and he does a pamphlet, Bait Hive for Honeybees. You can read that online as well. It gives you all the information you need to know.
Right. Do you use bait hives, Margaret?
Yes. And I think if you put food in them, you are putting a notice outside saying, free food, come and rob. It's like a food pantry. If you put old comb in there, it's going to become a wax moth. In certain parts of the country, a wax moth will go in. So I use bait hives, and they are empty, well-used brood boxes with a solid floor, and they will smell of to the scouts. They'll smell of bees, so you don't need anything inside. I mean, if they're going in a hollow tree, there's nothing inside. But, you don't want it full of wax moth, and you don't want it because once they start robbing it, if the bees go in it, they'll still continue to rob it. But I wouldn't add much more to what Beck and Mark have said.
I sprinkle a bit of propolis in, and when you clean the frames, save the propolis, I sprinkle a bit of propolis dust in, and I've melted beeswax onto the floor and the walls as well.
Yeah,
and
it's
yeah,
got
you're
to
right, you
smell
can get a
nice.
bit of wax moth, but your bees are in and they're out again straight away when you collect the swarm. It doesn't matter if wax moths are in it. Personally, I've never really seen many wax moths in my bait hives. Not that I'm going into the big.
But we bake them in
didn't when
April.
I was up north, but now I'm in
Yeah.
Oxfordshire. Oxfordshire is a wax moth factory.
Well, fair enough.
Enid, do you use bait hives?
Enid's muted.
Enid? No, she's got a separate one for us.
Yeah, I do, and with mixed results, yes, but I think it's always worth having a few out in your different apiaries.
Thank you. Right. The last question on my list is, could you please describe the perfect recipe for a successful Demaree? Mark, Beck, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, we do use Demarees, but we tend not to. So if anybody doesn't use them, we would tend to just take the entire brood box. Well, they're already double brooded. So with our second brood box super, we sometimes rearrange and put the whole lot on top. And we have had some success at swarm control. But for swarm prevention, we tend to do what we said before. Rather than lifting the whole brood box up here, well, why not just have it as your second box? It works very well. And you only have to roll it each week rather than having to keep hoying it up to the top. So it works much better to have your second brood box super and just keep moving up some open brood each week. The downside of Demaree for us is that you're putting it up top and you've got a lot of brood comb that then gets filled with honey. We also run quite a lot of 14 by 12 colonies, so good luck lifting a 14 by 12 colony on top. So it's only something I would even consider if you're on standard. It's way too heavy. But before I did a Demaree, I would try a second brood box super, and that way you can probably even use half of the frames up there as honey frames, and you can extract it, and that's your clean drawn comb for the next year. So I think that's a more effective way personally than a Demaree. But we have had some successes. Mark had a fantastic. He did a quick graft in bad weather and hadn't really quite prepared it. Shoved it in the top of the Demaree and got 14 out of 16 cells this year. So it was like we were expecting to be able to put it somewhere else, but found them not suitable. So it was a bit of a last minute thing. So they can be effective. They are a useful tool for keeping a good strong colony. But we would tend not to go with a Demaree. We prefer second brood box super.
So for the perfect recipe, you probably asked them the wrong people.
Margaret, perfect recipe.
Well, it depends what you want to do it for. The Demaree is used for swarm prevention, swarm control, but it's also used for queen rearing. So I'll go through it because I've written it all down here. I anticipate this question, right? So let us say you use it. Well, I'll talk about the three of them as we go along. So you take the roof off, the roof crown above the supers off and put them to one side. Move the brood box to one side and put a clean brood box there on the original stand. And at this stage, you need to find the queen. If you find the queen, put her in a safe place, whether that's on the frame she's on in a nuke box or in a cage, depending on you. If you can't find the queen, it's not the end of the world. So you've got a new brood box on your original stand and it's full of either drawn comb or foundation or a mixture of both, right? Take out the middle 4 frames and put every single bee in that, shake them in. Now, if you are doing swarm prevention, you don't want any queen cells. So shake the bees in, destroy the queen cells. If you're doing swarm control and you do want a queen cell, brush the bees in. Once you've found a really nice queen cell that's open and got a fat larva in it, you can shake the rest of the bees in. Put that frame with the one queen cell to one side. If you haven't found the queen, shake the queen in or brush. I'd shake her in rather than brush her in because I won't damage her. She'll bounce. But if I'm brushing her in, I could damage her. If you found the queen and she's in a cage or something, that's entirely different. If you do, the beauty of this is you don't need to find the queen. Shake every bee into the bottom box. Put the 4 frames in very gently. Make sure the queen's in there. Put the 4 frames in very gently. Put the queen excluder on. This is going to be a strong colony because it's about to swarm. Put the 2 supers in between and put another queen excluder on. Now, this is where it varies. If you're doing swarm control and you want to make an increase, then you've got that queen cell and she's going to go in the top box. You need a second entrance there. If you are using this to raise queen cells that you have produced, however, you need a second entrance in there. If, however, it's swarm prevention or swarm control and you don't want any more queens, you don't need a second entrance. So it's a queen excluder with a second entrance or just a queen excluder. Put your old box on top. This box has now got all of the brood in, except the frame that the queen was on if it's in the bottom box. Other than that, the queen's in the bottom box with frames. So in the top box, you have got all of the brood and the stores, and you've either got a queen cell, in which case you've got top entrance, or no queen cells. Or you might have put your cell bar in. You need a top entrance. Put the ground board on the roof. By the time you've put the roof on, the nurse bees who are in that bottom box, having been shaken in, will have come up through 2 queen excluders, and they will be looking after the brood. And they will be looking after your queen cells or your 1 queen cell or your whatever if you've done Miller or anything, got queen cells in there, they will be looking after them for you. In the bottom box, you will have the wax builders, you'll have the queen, and you'll have the foragers. They will sort themselves out. They cannot swarm because there's no brood. Then on the top box, if there are no queen cells, they might produce a queen. The pheromones won't go up that far. So they might produce a queen. So you have to go into that top box and knock after 3 days. Because if there was an egg, they could have made a queen cell on the 4th day. So after 4 days, rather, go in and knock down any queen cells that you don't want in the top box. After that, there are no more brood in that top box, young enough for them to make a queen. If you put a queen cell up there, leave them. They will seal the queen cell. She'll go out to mate and you'll have a new queen and it'll be a completely new colony. If you put a cell bar in, leave them. As long as you've been in after 4 days and knocked down any emergency cells, say, well, if you've got a cell bar in, then you need to go in and as soon as they're sealed, you need to put your protection on or put them in apodias or whatever you're going to do with them. So people get mixed up with the Demaree because you can do 3 different things with it. And what you need to think at the beginning, why am I doing this? Am I doing it for swarm prevention? I haven't got any queen cells, but I'm going to prevent them. Am I doing it to raise queen cells? I'm going to put my grafts in the top or my Miller cells in the top. Are they sealed? Are they unsealed? I mean, if they're sealed, they've already gone. Or am I going to harvest one of the queen cells that they're building down there and make myself a new colony? So you need to think about it. And really, every bee in the bottom box, everything else in the top box, the nurse bees go up, and all you need to think about is whether you need a second entrance. And if you've got one, it's at 90 degrees or 180 degrees.
Brilliant. Enid, would you like to throw anything into that?
No, I tend not to do Demarees because end up with a bit of a tower block. And if you want to check to make sure that the original queen's behaving, you've got to dismantle everything to get down to her. So I prefer the packed in and just get the brood onto a different stand. I find in the long run it's easier to manage, and you're not necessarily constantly increasing your colonies, because at the end of the season you can keep the colonies down by uniting. If you know that you've got your new queen is good, laying well, then keep her and unite, and that keeps your numbers down if you don't want to increase.
Can I just say there are two advantages of the Demaree system for swarm control. One is you don't have to find your queen. You can just put every bee in the bottom box, and a lot of newer beekeepers can't, some experienced beekeepers can't find their queen. Everything in the bottom box, all the bees. Secondly, it doesn't need a lot of space, and it doesn't need a lot of extra equipment. It needs an extra queen excluder or a top entrance, and an extra brood box and frames. So, you're not expanding. You just get rid of your old queen and merge them, or whatever you want to do. You sell your queens. But the main advantage is you don't have to find your queen to do swarm control.
Yeah, often if we can't find a queen and we shake them all in, and that's what we teach the beginners that, and then you put the brood up above the say a couple of supers, queen excluder, you put the brood up above that, the bees sort themselves out, and even the next day you can go back and take that top brood box and put it on a separate floor.
Absolutely, rearrange it. The other thing is the Demaree doesn't mean you don't lose your honey, because you've got those supers in the middle. It doesn't matter whether there's 2 or 3. You've got your supers in the middle, and the foragers are still bringing in the nectar. So you don't need a lot of equipment. You don't need a lot of space. You don't need to find your queen, and you don't lose your honey. But you have to think about, why am I doing this, before you start.
The one last thing I'd add about a Demaree is to think about what you're going to do towards the end of it as well. So you get towards sort of 2 to 3 weeks after a Demaree, and all of that brood is hatched out. So you do need to plan for that, because you might want to be doing rolling Demaree, taking frames up and down. You might want to take the box away altogether before they fill it up with honey. So don't just think I've done Demaree and I can leave it 5 or 6 weeks. You can't. You've got about, Margaret would know better than me, probably a couple of weeks before you're trying to do something with those frames at the top.
Yeah, need to go in after 4 days, because they don't like what you put in the top box. They'll have emergency queen cells. Yeah.
We don't tend to find we get many, so it's not the same number as if you remove the queen, but you still have to go through and shake off every frame and check. You might get fewer.
If you've got double brood boxes, as I have, it's a pain in the neck, because you've just got to, it's too tall, and I'm quite small. But if you're a newish beekeeper on a single box, and it's got supers on, and you can't find your queen, and you haven't got a lot of kit, it's ideal.
Yeah, lovely. Right. Thank you all, everyone. That's all the questions we had sent in advance. There aren't any in the chat that I can see, but one of the trustees, Richard Oliver, has said, do visit your branches, because they will have training sessions at the apiary. They will have lectures and help for people. So it's well worth being part of your local association. Enid, what do you want to say? Did you want to comment?
I was going to comment on that, but I sort of briefly noticed that comment coming in. You find you could belong to quite a large branch or local association, and they organise talks, often just once a month, and the number of members that actually turn up in relation to the amount of members in the association is really quite poor. And your organisers, your secretary, or whoever organises the lectures is struggling. Why is everybody not coming along? Okay, you can't get to every single one, but you sometimes find the numbers are really quite low at some of the meetings. And, Why is that? Get along, support your local association or branch. That's the whole point of being a member. And, you know, they do put on some excellent talks, demos, and your cup of tea afterwards. Sometimes there's just about as much learned with your cup of tea and chat afterwards. So not only is it about socialising and learning, you know, there's loads of benefits to it. But please do support your local association.
Absolutely. I think Linda put her hand up and then put it down. Did you have a question, Linda? No.
No, yes, I did actually. Sorry, I thought I'd emailed one in, but it must have gone amiss somewhere. I was just wondering if you've ever known a queen lay in between mating flights. I've done some queen rearing this year, and I was looking for my queens, found eggs. I'm really good at finding my queens normally, and I only had a few frames of bees, obviously, because it was a small 3-frame nuke. I could not find the queen, but I could see eggs. And I just thought, can I just not find her? Or has she actually laid some eggs, had a go, and then gone back out again?
I think that doesn't happen. Basically,
she has to mature before she lays the eggs. So if she's going to go out, she'll go out again either that day or the next day. Then it takes a few days before she actually starts laying eggs.
Your possibilities, if there's eggs in there, is you could have two queens in at the same time. So we have been in colonies and seen the mother there. If you've got a supersedure and the daughter's still running around, so the mother's still laying eggs. If you've only got a few eggs, remember there's still laying workers, so you might get the odd egg laid by a laying worker. They're policed, so if you've got laying workers, just a few, then there might be the odd egg in there, but no, you wouldn't get the queen coming in, laying eggs and going back out again.
No, that's what I thought.
There's going to be some,
Well,
it says, who's going to see the queen come back.
I go through my colonies in the spring, and any queens that have got the mark rubbed off them, I remark them. And I was doing this once, and my partner said to me, because he was putting the colony, he said, "You haven't marked this queen?" I said, "I have." He said, "No, she's running around and look." And I argued with him, and then in the end, I went over and had a look. And sure enough, there was a second queen. How many times? I have never, ever, once I found a queen and marked her, I have never, ever looked for a second queen until that day. So I think Beck's right there. It could well be a supersedure, and the mother could have still been laying.
Yeah, we've had that.
Yeah.
I was amazed to see a second queen walking around when I just marked one. And since then, I always look and see if there's another one. I never found another one, but you know.
We've only seen it once.
It's only that Jim said to me, "Margaret, you haven't marked this queen," and we argued. In the end, I went over.
We never
argued.
argued.
Right, lovely. There is one question that I am going to ask because I think it's probably really relevant and timely. Do you have any tips for keeping wasps at bay, given their prevalence this year? We'll start with Margaret.
They're terrible this year, and they're very much early this year, given the number of insects around. I mean, around where I am, I've been called out to wasp nests twice in Aberdeen Little Village. Small entrance. Small entrance is the answer, particularly for a nuke. A small entrance and wasp traps. But we've got wasps everywhere this year, and it's only middle of July. So wasp traps with jam in, not honey. Jam and water. The bees won't go in because it's jam. And yes, you will get some other insects, but if you only make small holes with the size of a pencil, you'll only get wasps. I mean, I've had jars half full of wasps. It's ridiculous this year. But very small entrances. And the trouble is, it's been so hot, you want the entrance block out. But I was up at Stoneleigh over the weekend doing assessments. Wasps everywhere.
Do you have anything to add, Beck?
We have had some success. I mean, they're obviously strong colonies, so this is not a time of year to be doing splits or anything else. And if you've got, if you're thinking of combining, I would combine colonies now. Strong colonies can defend. We have used like wasp out type entrances, which have like an entrance, but a piece of like electrical conduit that goes out with some holes drilled in, and the wasps come to the grill, but the bees come along and go along the electrical conduit and come out the side. So they are very effective, as I believe underfloor entrances. But the bottom line is, if we've had nukes under attack, the nukes just aren't strong enough to defend themselves. We just lock them in at night and move them somewhere else. We've got more than one apiary, and if you need to move them from your garden to your allotment temporarily, sometimes you just have to move them somewhere else because they are not going to make it if it's a small nuke.
Yeah, as beginners, we were constantly being told strong colonies, you've got to have strong colonies, because as a beginner, A, you don't know what a strong colony is, and B, you probably haven't got them. And we lost nukes, we lost colonies to wasps. This year, yes, there are lots of wasps. Yes, we have jam jars full of wasps. I've got apideas out there, I've got nukes out there, we've got colonies out there. Not one has yet been in any way threatened by wasps.
We've got a lot of wasps around the house because we've got a lot of equipment, and we use apple juice in our wasp traps. Cheap, nasty, long life apple juice, and that works really, really well. But it's sad to have to do it.
What's that, Margaret?
Well, I think it's the early spring. The queens came out, they could set up really quickly. They didn't have the queens weren't stuck in with half a nest waiting for the weather to improve. They were out foraging straight away.
And they didn't get killed sometimes in early frost. Last year we had early frost and a really hard cold snap.
Really wet weather while they're out foraging, because the queens go out foraging, don't they, early on, and they get trapped in the rain. That just didn't happen this year.
Really hot, dry start.
We've also got two different kinds. We've killed the nest in our roof. We've got the little tiny native wasp. I say tiny, they're tiny compared to the median wasp. We have median wasps as well. So we know there's at least two nests nearby.
Could you put a picture of your electrical wire thing? So that
electrical conduit. Yes, we will too. Yeah, we'll
see it, because it sounds really good.
Well, if you look at a piece of electrical conduit and look at the ones they sell in various shops that are
exactly the width of an entrance block.
It's just made from electrical conduit. If you actually took one apart, that's what I did, and then I
stick it on with glue with some holes.
But yes, we can show
tunnel
you.
Goes
I've got a picture of all the different bits that go together.
I don't know what an electrical conduit is.
Trunking.
Right, okay, that's fair enough. And I didn't either until I went to B&Q.
Sorry, what did you say, Diane?
It's trunking that you cover wires on the wall with.
Yeah, little square cross section.
Like a U, a plastic U.
Yeah,
and just use that.
The top layer slides on and off, so you can take it off, drill the holes, put it back on you.
It's website, you'll see it. Sticky tape, and you can just snap the front onto it.
So you can spend 12 quid at the best supplier in town, or you can go and buy a bit of conduit that's a metre long for £1 and make 7.
I now know what it is. Thank you.
Yeah. They're easy to make. And we have half a dozen of them in the box that we used in our second year. We've never used them since. And we've never taken the entrance blocks out, and we've never closed them down in winter. The only time we ever close them down is if wasps start to threaten the box, which so far, touch wood,
we had one apiary last year, didn't we?
Yeah,
they were on a small entrance.
It's just lottery. If you're unlucky, one year we had a wasp nest in the apiary, and they were picking off the mating nukes one after another.
So do you have
all the wasps in my front garden, because I just inundated with them, and I've got all sorts of wasp traps up, and they're certainly filling up, but there still seems to be a lot around.
Saray Summer, who wrote Endless Forms, I think it is, says it was the perfect year for wasps. And there were so many insects earlier this year, and they will have fed really well as well. That is enough for tonight, everyone. We have overrun a little bit because I've allowed a couple of extra questions. Thank you very much to the panelists. I'm sure we've all enjoyed this immensely. It's been really useful. So thank you, Margaret, Enid, Beck and Mark. It's been
thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Enid. Thanks to all the people who've been listening. How many people were there, Diane?
There's I think we got up to about 80 or 90. I suspect there's something on tonight.
I think the Chancellor has put her speech back because of this.
Well,
the speech is at 9 o'clock at the Mansion House, and it's probably because this was told. Yeah,
maybe everyone was invited apart from us. So anyway, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.